Let's talk Nvidia. Jason Snipe. Basically been dead money for 8 months. There's a lot riding on it for it and the group of the hyperscalers, who, by the way, have been largely in correction. In case you haven't noticed, Nvidia is down 13% from its high. Microsoft 14, Alphabet 15, Amazon 11, Meta slightly less than that. After its 20-day win streak, Meta's sort of reversed a bit. It's down 8% from its high. Escalator up, elevator down. And that's what's happened to some of these names. But what are you thinking about for Nvidia today? Moment of truth.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the moment of truth, Scott. There's a lot riding on the print today. You know, when we heard about the DeepSeek news several weeks ago, 17% drawdown, almost $600 billion in market cap lost. Obviously, that had an impact on the stock. Now we're hearing again about export controls and what that looks like. But what I can say, what has been reiterated from the hyperscalers is CapEx spend has not changed whatsoever. This DeepSeek news had no real impact on those numbers. We're hearing from Microsoft $80 billion. We're hearing from Meta 60 to 65 billion. We're hearing from Amazon $100 billion plus dollars in CapEx. So what we need to hear, Scott, is $38 billion of revenue. We need to hear a guide of 2 to 3 billion over and above. So that would put us at 42 billion for the quarter. We need to also hear about insatiable demand. That, I think, is what we need to hear today. And I think they will do what they need to do, and I think the print will be really strong. Okay, let's bring in Christina Partsinevelos now to tell us whether Nvidia can, in fact, meet this moment, the moment of truth. Because the goalposts may have moved as it relates to the DeepSeek day. That really sort of changed the conversation in some respects towards Nvidia. The company has, I think you would agree, sort of found itself a bit on the defensive since then. So today's even more important.
Yeah, they've definitely been on the defensive, seeing that they're still more relevant in the inference stage. But the stock price has retraced about 2/3 of its value since that drop in January. If anything, what we're seeing is Nvidia coming closer to its fundamentals. Liz pointed it out that it needs to go back to the fundamentals, right size the valuation, which is 33x right now, still below its 5-year average. For Nvidia, Jason spoke about it. It's the $42 billion buy side number for the guide that we're really looking for. And I bring up the buy side because it's the first time in 2 years where those buy side expectations have actually dropped to fall in line with consensus. So everybody is a little bit more tempered going into this. You have the DeepSeek, you have the U.S. export controls, you have the air pocket that's going from Hopper over to Blackwell, and then the next iteration of Blackwell, which would be the Blackwell Ultra out later this year, the B300. So those are three factors. You have gross margins that are coming down to about 72.5%. We knew this, management warned of it, but still, nonetheless, it's there. So these are several factors that are weighing on the stock. But I think the major thing is going to be that guide and demand momentum for Blackwell into the next 4 quarters.
Yeah, Christina, thanks for setting that up perfectly. You got a busy day, and I'll see you throughout the day, obviously.
Time for our 360 round. Let's talk about Nvidia. The earnings are due out after the bell. Everybody's been waiting on this for about a month since earnings season began. You've had February 26th on your calendar. All these tech stocks are lined up with options trades in the options market for 10% swings. Let's have our panel see what they have to say about this. Joining me right now here in studio is Spencer Hakimian, is here, Chief Investment Officer at Toulouse Capital Management, and Greg Halter, Director of Research at Carnegie Investment Council. Thank you both for being with us. So, Greg, why don't you tell us your thoughts on Nvidia, which had a high of 153, has since pulled back, right? And that was in early January. And since then has pulled back year to date. In fact, it's down 1%. Where do you think Nvidia goes after tonight?
I think the options markets are pricing in a plus or minus 13% move. So we'll see. I will state also that over the last, I think, 9 months, the shares have basically been flat. So if anything, relative to valuation, the earnings are catching up to the stock price, if you will. And I expect more good numbers coming out after the close tonight.
Yeah, the options market, I did notice that some of the whales were piling in to the bullish trade, bullish stance, and this was at 10:30 this morning, an article that talked about options activity, unusual options activity. It has come off the highs. Some of your thoughts here, Spencer.
Yeah, so, as it implies with options, there is clearly a big move priced in either direction, as there always is with NVIDIA. I think perhaps even more interesting than just the earnings alone will be the guidance, what NVIDIA says regarding anything about DeepSeek, Grok, Llama from Meta. There are so many, competitors that are coming along. And I'm looking for any clarity on if they see anything, if they're seeing demand shift in either direction. We got some rumors that Microsoft was trying to get out of some AI leases. So we would just like to see some clarity going forward about this story, because, a lot of the market for 2025 is priced on tech earnings growth. And if we don't get that, it could be trouble.
Yeah, and you make a great point talking about the competition, what happened with DeepSeek. That's a new conversation that we're going to have. I mean, we saw the DeepSeek sell-off day where, can everything move faster and cheaper? And, maybe we don't need these big guys the way we originally thought. What was your reaction to that kind of day, Greg?
Well, I was on vacation, and actually it was kind of a shock to see the moves that were happening since that came out, I think, over the weekend and on a Sunday. So the Monday's trading was startling, to say the least, on what all this means. Since that point, you've had the mega companies, if you will, not really step back on their capital spending plans at all. In fact, I just saw today that Meta is potentially talking about a $200 billion AI data center. And they're talking about chips and the delays in chips from Nvidia and so forth and so on. Who knows if that will come off or not, but this is on the back of their facility they're putting up in Louisiana. So there continues to be all kinds of big news. GE Vernova made an announcement today as well on the power side. So it looks like they're going full steam ahead, and they'd rather have more than less at this point.
Today says options are pricing in a plus or minus more than 10% move. Okay, either way over the next 2 days, based on what happens. There are others who have suggested that this is a really important moment for the market as a whole.
I think it is very important for the market. I'll take the 10%. I think that's going to go to the upside, Scott. I look at the valuation. I look at the business metrics. Jason, what you were saying, it's hard to see demand falling off. I think that's what Christina was saying as well. So let's look at the numbers. The stock trades at 30 times forward earnings for a stock that's about to show net income growth and earnings per share growth of greater than 100% year over year. For the forward year, that's projected to 50%. 50% versus a 30 times forward multiple is a very attractive multiple. Now, stocks can always go down, all right? And we know, Josh talked about this yesterday, that for the last several quarters, when earnings have been announced by NVIDIA, they've been fabulous, the guidance has been fabulous, and the stock has gone down. So how the stock trades tomorrow or Friday is immaterial. At this valuation, given what looks to be insatiable demand, I forget if that was you, Jason, or Christina who said it, and the growth rate in earnings per share, I'll take that 10% to the higher, Scott.
What are you thinking about this?
It kind of feels to me like NVIDIA is running in place.
Well, it has been. That's what I said. It's been dead money for a while.
So it's up 5% since August 28th's earnings report. Here's what's interesting. I went and looked at some of the things that I'm utilizing in the momentum strategy itself. And this will be the first earnings report for NVIDIA since the middle of 2022, where if you look at the return for the stock versus where it was on the last earnings report, it's negative. It's actually down since the last earnings report. That has not been the formula for NVIDIA for the better part of the last several years. I also looked into the options market, and interestingly enough, it seems as though you're getting more of a premium that's being paid for the puts versus the calls. Again, that's interesting information. Collectively, you put that all together and you say that there seems to be more of an openness, there seems to be more of a willingness to push up against what has been a really, really strong bull market for NVIDIA for the better part of the last 18 months. I don't know necessarily that that's the right play. I think that where NVIDIA is right now is really in a process where it's going to be consolidating. You could utilize 115 up to 145, and I think you're just going to be basically see it ping pong back and forth in that range.
NVIDIA pulls back tonight or tomorrow morning or whatever. Do you think that's a buy, Spencer, when you look at this? I mean, for the big picture, or do you wait and see?
Again, it depends what it's pulling back for. If the company was guiding for 40% growth and it came in at 38, a pullback, maybe a buy there. But if they are saying that they are getting a lot of competition, I think you want to be very careful here. AI as a whole is undoubtedly going to change this world, but the individual companies, it is very hard, even at this point in time, to tell who is going to be the ones that are going to benefit from this. So I would be very cautious and just, play it by the minute.
Even just the broad-based story for all of these tech and chip stocks is tariffs and how that could affect things. I mean, that's something. I mean, they have the Blackwell line of chips, which obviously has huge demand, insane demand, or whatever he called it. That's something that they'll probably brag about, I'm sure. But they have tariffs looming, coupled with the export controls, right, to China. Are they going to be able to send their processors to China, right? That's something not just for Nvidia, but all these tech stocks. Are you eager to hear about that?
Absolutely, because I'm looking for Nvidia is always trying to modify their chips to be within the regulations of these export controls the United States have placed on, so they can export to China. With that being said, the direction of this trade war seems to be just getting stricter and stricter, and they're making it more difficult for Nvidia to trade chips with China. So we're always looking for commentary on that. China is the biggest market for chips in the world as we currently stand.
Do you like semis for the most part, or no?
At these prices, I don't.
No, they're a little frothy. Greg, just quickly, AI investments, you were talking about this Apple, Meta. I mean, you're seeing that, and that could really buoy the group in general. Final quick thought, quickly.
Yeah, definitely could. You really have to look company specific on what they're doing. We also heard the other day from Apple's going to spend $500 billion over the next 4 years, which is a lot given that their capex over the last 10 years, I think, has averaged about 10 or $12 billion. So that's a major ramp up if it actually happens.
Well,
just give us your baseline kind of assessment of where things line up here. Melissa, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's going to be an exciting quarter. I think coming into the quarter, no big surprises are anticipated based on Visible Alpha consensus. We have not seen the numbers moving too much since last quarter. Traditionally, NVIDIA's numbers do start to move a bit, and that's what leads to those significant revisions that we've seen over the past 6 quarters. So this one could be a bit more muted. I think as we look to Q1 and next year and this coming fiscal year, the critical thing is going to be how they guide to B series. Currently, we're expecting, based on Visible Alpha consensus, a couple of $2 billion in Q4 for that business, and then for that business to accelerate significantly in FY 2026 to about $81 billion based on consensus.
Okay, so as far as then maybe some surprises you anticipate to see, and thank you so much for being here. I'm curious what you think stands out as far as like what the street might not be pricing in, what we could not be expecting, because I've been joking I expect fireworks, but I think that I'm in a very small camp of people anticipating some volatility hugely on the back of this event.
Within that B series line, there is significant debate in the market. We see a number of analysts clustered below $40 billion in revenue, and then we see a number of analysts clustered above $100 billion in revenue. So the way that the company guides and the type of commentary and color they give in the earnings call will be critical to determining how that ramps into this fiscal year. That could potentially be a catalyst and may create some volatility.
And you're right. I mean, tonight is data. If Nvidia comes out and the earnings news kind of reinstills confidence, then, I think that we will see a more balanced, broader participation this year. We expect the market to be up 10%, and both camps could do well. I think it just depends on what the news flow is out of areas like Nvidia and the Mag 7. As long as the news is not devastating, they can still do well. And as long as the economy holds up and earnings in these other areas, they're very attractively priced. And I think you could just see a broadening in the market with some of these other stocks playing catch up. But it's a day-to-day kind of observation on what's going on.
So you mentioned your price target of 6,600 by year end, implying about a 10% move. And I hear you saying that there is still a bit of optimism to be squeezed out of the tech trade, but what gets us that 10% move to the upside? Again, you're saying this broadening, but you still like tech. What exactly does that 10% move to the upside look like, and how do you position to take advantage of that?
Well, first of all, it's a function of PE multiples and earnings, right? That's how you get to 6,600. So if you apply a 21.5 multiple to our expected earnings that you'll see as we move into 26 of a little north of 300, that's how you get 6,600. And then you have to go underneath the hood and see, well, how are you getting that earnings growth? And quite frankly, right now, consensus earnings, when you look broadly across sectors, not just technology, but it's healthcare, consumer discretionary, finance, earnings growth looks good. So, you can argue about positioning, but when you just look at the aggregate index level, there's earnings support there. And it's predicated on about 2.5% earnings growth. The 10-year Treasury trading around 4.5%. And solid margins that hold up. And right now, there's no reason to think that that's not going to happen. And we may get wiggy day to day about the recent headlines on news coming out of the administration or speculation about what the Fed may do. But underneath the hood, you've got solid earnings growth broadly. And that's what you got to continue to track and see if we stay on course. And there is risk when you're trading at 21, 22 times. If profit margins stall, then you're going to get some hiccups. But right now, that's how you get to 6,600.
And so when we're looking at that, is that going to be something that shows up in the guidance portion of it, the conference call portion of this? It's probably, as you're talking about something that's happening in the future, I'm guessing it's not going to show up in this quarter's numbers. One thing that Nvidia has done quite nicely in the recent, let's call it year, but really 2 years now, is that when it does report its numbers, it's just hitting the consensus out of the park. Do you see that happening this time around, or are we finally coming back to earth here a little bit with this company's just massive, massive beats?
Well, based on the company's guidance, they did call out that they anticipate the B series to generate around several $billion in this quarter. They've articulated that it's in production, and that, I think where this gets really interesting is how does it go from a couple of $1 billion this quarter to $81 billion based on Visible Alpha consensus at the end of this year. So, or I should say fiscal year 2026, how that really truly ramps. And like I said, there's a significant amount of debate about really what that number looks like as we come into this next fiscal year.
So that's exactly somewhat of the commentary I was seeing, and why I expect maybe somewhat of an unknown when it comes to this post-earnings move. But what do you say to those that have questions about DeepSeek and like the massive repricing concern of the build of AI? I mean, is Nvidia going to mention this on their earnings call? Are we going to see further updates? I have to imagine when you shed almost $600 billion in market cap in one single session, you are going to address this.
I think DeepSeek is an interesting model. I mean, they demonstrated that they can do reasoning for a fraction of the cost. Right now, one of the big obstacles with getting AI applications into production is the cost, and the cost is prohibitive. And so, I think figuring out and having ways that have been proven to reduce the cost is compelling. It's, I think it gets everybody focused on, okay, wait, how could we maybe be rethinking about this? What else could we be doing that may enable us to leverage this generative AI capability, but also not have to be so constrained by the cost?